Mayor? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'd like to go through today. It's really an overview of many of the halachos of Pas Yisroel. I don't think it will be possible for us to really cover all of the details of Pas Yisroel today, but as we're all familiar, and we'll get to as we go along, Be'ez Hashem, Pas Yisroel is a timely sugya as we're getting closer to Aseres Yemei Tshuva. And we know that one of the halachas that we try to be nizer in during Aseres Yemei Tshuva particularly is Pas Yisroel. So we'll get there Be'ez Hashem as we go along, and let's start with source number one, where this all starts from. So the Mishnah Masechtas Avodah Zarah, Daf Lamed Hem, the base tells us Ve'elu Dvarim Shal Ovdei Kachavim, the following items that a guy produces, asurin, they're forbidden for us to eat. However, ve'ein isurin isur hana, they're not prohibited for us to get benefit from. So we could maybe we could sell them, or you can use them for other forms of pleasure, but it would not be allowed to be consumed. What are the examples? The Mishnah says, Chalav shechelvoi ovei kachavim, milk that was milked by a non-Jew, ve'ein Yisrael re'eu, and the Jew did not watch him in the process. And we are not going to discuss today all the halachas that comes up often with what we call chalav stam today and chalav of the companies, but that's halacha number one, real chalav akum, chalav that was milked by a goyish farmer and there was no Jewish supervision, is forbidden. Number two, the Mishnah says, is pas, bread baked by a goy. Number three, the Mishnah says, is shemen shelohen, the oils produced by a goy. Rebbe ubeis dino hetiru hashemen. Rebbe and his bezdin then permitted subsequently the oils. V'hashlokais, and cooked food. So these are many halachas. We're going to primarily focus on the one word of the Mishnah which said v'hapas, that bread baked by a non-Jew is going to be prohibited. Now let's first make 100% clear, we are not concerned here at all with anything of not kosher ingredients, because that Chazal didn't need to ask it for us. If we were concerned that there was something not kosher in the bread, then it's pashut, it's aser. If they used treifa oils, or they used whatever ingredients that might be not kosher, then it's nothing to talk about. Obviously, we're talking about here, everything we know is kosher. That could be ascertained, but nonetheless, Chazal asered it. Now, why did Chazal aser it? So, the Rishonim will discuss it, the Gemara will discuss it. I just quoted the Rambam for simplicity's sake. The Rambam in source number 2 tells us there are many things, just paraphrasing the first couple words, there are many things which Chazal asered, and they are not based in the Torah, so we're not even looking for a pasuk to make this an asmachta or anything of that nature. And the whole purpose was, the Rambam says, the second line here, kedei lisrachik min ha'akum, in order to keep us away from the nations of the world, ad shlo yisarvu behen Yisrael vivo dechasna. So we should not intermingle with the goyim, and we should not chas v'shalom come to intermarry. Ve'elu hein, and these are the things that Chazal prohibited for us. Asur lishtoi simayin, we can't have drinks with them. Va'afilu makom she'ein lochash liyayin nesach, even if it's not a concern that they are going to serve us forbidden wines, which is also a whole other topic, maybe for a different time, about why we prohibit wine from a guy as well. But even if we're not talking about you drinking only kosher wine, there's a prohibition to sit down and have a party with a guy. And then the Rambam concludes, we cannot eat their bread or their cooked foods, and even where there's no concern for, like I said before, the non-kosher ingredients, even the blias of the pots, and all types of concerns of a kashrus concern. So again, we're making clear, this has nothing to do with kashrus. This is a particular gezer that Chazal put in simply so that we should not come to have too much social settings with them, and therefore it'll avoid intermarriage. So I think, as we all know, if we can't eat with them, then it automatically creates a certain barrier in a social setting, and that hopefully will keep us further away. The Ben Ish Chai in source number 3 just takes us with a little more of a Kabbalistic twist, and this is the Ben Ish Chai in the Psicha, the Parshas Balak, where he quotes the pasuk from the end of Chukas. The pasuk there is talking about by the Shira that Klal Yisrael is saying by the well. The pasuk there says, where it's bold in the beginning, Ber Chafura Sarim, the well that was dug by the princes, Karua Nedive Am, that was like excavated by the nobles of the nation, B'Mechaykik Mishanaisam, that was done with their tools, something of that nature. So simply is to talk about how Moshe and Aaron brought forth for us the water from the rock, and that's a simple reading of the pasuk. But the Ben Ish Chai takes it with a little more of a twist al pi Kabbalah, and he says that Tzidua, that the place where all our neshamas come from, up in Shemayim, there's a certain chamber that's called Be'er, like the wellspring, and that's where our neshamas are all formed, and we all come from one power source, so to speak. We're all coming from one super source of a neshama, and he says that where underlined that it's all interesting to read. I'm just going to point out some of the main things. He says V'Omar, and he says Be'er Chafura Sarm, the Be'er that was dug by the princes. That's the Shleisha Avos. That's our 3 forefathers. Sheyesh B'Shmoisam. If you take the letters of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and add them together, it comes to number 13, which is a minyan echad. 1 Karu Nedive'am, that it was dug and was excavated by the princes. That's the Shvatim. The Shvatim also, after Yosef was split into 2, also we have 13 Shvatim, 13 again. The idea of echad. Then he goes on to saying that the imahos, our four mothers, also have, if you take all their letters, their names together, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, also equals 13. He's just going on and on about how we see a lot of unity in the building of Klal Yisrael, and that's why we're Echad, that's why we have this togetherness. All neshamas come together, and he says that's in contrast to the nations of the world, where although they also come from a spiritual source, but that source is not unified, not coming together. They're always considered separate nefashos, like the pasuk says, by the descendants of Esav. They're nefashos in a plural sense. They're not as one nefesh. But Mashenk and Klal Yisrael, when we came down to Mitzrayim, we were shivim nefesh. We were 70, but we were all one soul. And then he continues on the left column there. He says that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, warned us so strongly in the Torah not to marry the Goyim, and because that would just, he says, he make it sound very almost scientific, so to speak. He says his pasuk wouldn't be compatible, because if you're dealing with, we come from one power source, and the Goyim comes, so to speak, from another power source. Just use those type of terms, and it just wouldn't be a compatible match. And that's why it says Chazal went out of the way so far to make all these Gedarim and Siyagim to keep us away from this Isser of Chitun, B'Avodah Zarah, and B'Avodah Kachavim, Mazalai, so a person should not get ensnared and trapped into this setting, and that's why Chazal are very strict over here. And he says, of course, there are other reasons as well, but this is the reason that Chazal told us. This is always an interesting concept that, when Chazal tell us a reason for the Gezerah, is there more than meets the eye, or is this it? So the Ben Ish Chai seems to learn this is the most simple reason. This is the reason we can all relate to that Chazal told us. But he says there are many other tam nistar v'soid amuk, other deep reasons that Chazal told us why this is going to be usher. So this is step 1. The Mishnah is telling us pas of a guy, bread that a guy bakes for us is forbidden. We know it's usher, and the reason is because we're concerned with intermarriage. So let's jump ahead, and we're going to go now to the next page of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch paskins this halacha, as we should all, we all could imagine. Also, Chacham lecha pashal amin, for Chazal asked for us to eat the bread of the nations of the world, of the kechavim, mishum chasnus. So the Shulchan Aruch saying very clearly, it's forbidden because we're afraid of leading to intermarriage. And then the Ramah puts in, now you're going to be a chacham, and you're going to say, what do you mean? The priest or a nun, they're not married, they're not having any children, so then maybe I can go ahead and have their bread because I can't intermarry with them. There's no offspring for me to intermarry. They're going to remain single their whole life. And nonetheless, the Ramah says that's irrelevant to this discussion, and it's still going to be usher. The Shach suggests that maybe because we're afraid that even though they might not be married, but if you got close and social with them, they might introduce you to somebody who does have children, is not a priest or a nun, and you might come to intermarry. But even if that's not the case, even if they're a hermit and live somewhere in the middle of nowhere, it's still going to be prohibited because this is a gezeres chazal, becomes like a loy plug. And then the Shulchan Aruch continues and says, keep in mind we're only discussing here bread of the 5 grains. But if someone buy bread that comes from beans, legumes, or rice, or anything of that, that's not included in the gezerah of pas palter. So although there might be what we call now gluten-free bread, if it's really gluten-free and not even from oats, it's made out of all types of interesting stuff. So it's for bracha, we'll say it's usually going to be shahakol because there's no mezainis in there. So that even though they call it bread, it's marketed as bread, but that would never fall into this gezerah. Chazal, when they use the term bread, they always meant to the good old classic bread that's from one of the 5 grains. So if it's oat bread, spelt, rye, barley, or any type of wheat, whole wheat, white wheat, whatever it is, that's all going to fall into the category of this isser of pas akum. Now, even though we're only talking about until now, the pas, and pas literally means bread, the Pri Chadash in source number 5, and almost everybody speaks this out as well. I just quoted it from here because it was the most straightforward to put on the paper. For now, he says, not only are we talking about bread, he says, v'chein kol davar, any matter, shabulas and ava, which comes from a thick dough and has a bread-like appearance, even though there's lots of sweets and other spices mixed in, like what we call pas haba bekistan, which is a tremendous sugya unto itself, but the basic idea is anything that falls into the category of cakes, cookies, crackers, pies, all those things, even though they are not what we would call in English bread, but in halacha they have the same category as bread. And even if even it happens to be if you eat a certain amount that becomes your whole meal, you actually have to even wash and bench on it. But nonetheless, he's saying that it has the same halacha of pas akum, and it's going to be forbidden as well. So when we say pas, we're not only talking about this simple rye bread, white bread, etc. We're talking about our regular cookies, cakes, crackers, etc. So if we would stop right here, right now, we would all be up in arms. What's our heter? We have all types of pie. We go into our local supermarket. We see all types of things with hashgacha, with reputable hashgachas, right? That are seemingly not produced by a Jewish fellow. So at this point, we're puzzled. What's going on? Chazal said it's usher. We're afraid of chasnas, of intermarriage, and we see over here it doesn't only apply to bread in its purest sense, but it refers to anything which is into the bread family. Before I continue, I just want to emphasize, when we talk about bread family, it doesn't necessarily mean because it's mezainos, just because we're making that bracha, it's going to be in the bread family. For example, macaroni. If someone has any type of pasta, that is not in the bread family, although it comes from wheat, but that would not fall into the category of pasta babakistan, because it's the way it's made, and particularly it's cooked, it's not baked, etc. Even if you would bake it afterwards, it still always retains the status of not pas. Similarly, there are certain snacks, like super snacks or biscuit, they're called, other things, meaning that are fried in oil, other things which are not in the category of pas, even though you might make a mezonos on them, it might be coming from a wheat product, does not necessarily put into this category of pas akum. So it's well, it's not pas, right? Okay. So let's move on now to.
How about the meiri? How does he fit? You don't have a meiri down.
I don't put the meiri.
I think he'd make it be a fillet with the meiri.
Well, what type of akum you saying? Because
right. He believes in the 7 laws of Noah.
But we have to know we're still halal, still be forbidden to marry him.
I don't. Yeah, it'll be yeah. But
so still Isser Chasnas.
Maybe maybe you would.
But if it's still usher to marry them, then it wouldn't be. I don't know how we can make that distinction.
Well, it means that they're more civilized.
I'll tell you what. I didn't put this down.
They're not over at Avodah Zarah.
Okay, so fine. That's true. Well, that's interesting. It's not really. It's not only Avodah Zarah. There are some Rishonim who learn that really the chash is only Avodah Zarah, not chasnus. But the way the Shulchan Aruch paskins it is because we're worried about intermarriage. If we're worried about intermarriage, it's not just that they're going to lead us to do. Even if you have a non-believer, an atheist, right? That's also going to be usher. There's a machlekes in the Paiskim. What do we do with a Yisrael mummer? Someone who's Jew but has strayed from the path. What status do we give him regarding this halacha? If you say it's simply a problem of intermarriage, there's no problem with intermarriage with a Jew who's strayed from the path. If they're Jewish, they're Jewish. You can marry them. Maybe you have to make you don't want them to lead you away from a mitzvah observance. But if the whole problem is only chasnas, it would seem like, according to many Paiskim, that it shouldn't be usher. But however, there are poskim that are machmir on it, and if you're going to be machmir there, all I'm saying is that for sure you should be machmir by someone who's a real guy. Okay, let's move on now to the kula and the different categories we're going to get to within the how we produce bread. So in source number 6, it's the Shulchan Aruch. It's really coming from the Mishnah based on the Gemara, but we'll just learn it in the Shulchan Aruch. So Yesh Mekayim Shulchan Aruch tells us certain communities shemekilin b'davar that are lenient. V'loichim pas minachtoim ovikachavim, and they buy bread from a goyish baker. B'makam she'ein sham nachtom yisrael, in a place where there is no Jewish baker available, because it's a time of pressing need. So this is what we're going to call pas palter. Palter is a term used for a commercial baker, someone who's not just a regular guy baking out of his kitchen and selling it for his lemonade stand and selling some fresh baked cookies. That would be pas balabayas. That's an individual guy who's selling bread. Pas palter is when you have a commercial setting. It doesn't have to be a tremendous enterprise, but anything which qualifies as a commercial setting, not just a private individual selling bread. That's called pas palter. And the Shulchan Aruch says if it's hard to get, if it's a place where it's not available to have pas Yisroel, then you're allowed to buy pas palter. We'll get to the whys in a minute. Let's just first get down the categories. The Ramah says even further. V'yeshayim says the Ramah. Even in a place where pas Yisrael is readily available, we'd be allowed to buy pas palter, the bakery bread of a guy, as well. So now we have machlekes Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. We'll call it machlekes Sfardim and Ashkenazim. The Sfardim are going to be machmir that as long as Pas Yisroel is available, Pas Palter, even Pas Palter is forbidden. Only in a place where Pas Yisroel is not available, where now this halacha of commercially baked bread kicked in, and now we could say you could buy Pas Palter. And according to the Ramah, even if Pas Yisroel is mutter, is available, it's still permissible to buy Pas Palter of a guy. So again, we have three categories. We have Pas Yisroel, completely bread baked by a Jew, and we'll see a little bit later how much a Jew has to be involved in the process, but we'll call it Jewish bread for now. That's always mutter, hopefully, as long as it's kosher, it's mutter. The second category, lesser, is called Pas Palter of a goy. That's pas the bread that was baked by a goyish baker for an industrial commercial setting. So there, the Shulchan Aruch says it's permitted if you cannot get Pas Yisroel, and the Ramah says it's permitted even if you could get Pas Yisroel. And the last category is Pas Balabayis, of the bread of a goyish individual, a homeowner. Even if you can ascertain that everything, all the ingredients you use are only kosher, the bread would still be prohibited because of the gezer of Chazal of forbidding goyish bread. Now, if the Mishnah said it's usher, and we said the reasons, and we didn't go through all the Gemaras, etc., everything, but the Shulchan Aruch paskin it's usher, so where does this come from, this distinction between a baker and an individual? So we'll go to the Taz in source number 7, and the Taz, in short words here, keys us into a crucial point. Yesh Mekaymis, he's commenting on the words of the Shulchan Aruch, there are some places that are mekel. Lefi, he says, shegezeres hapas lo nispashe b'chol ha'mekaymis. Because this gezer, when Chazal instituted it, it never properly spread to all the outlying areas. B'shah shegazru le b'mei Tanoim. So it was originally instituted in the days of Tanoim. At the end, after the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and the message didn't get across, didn't reach everywhere. Now, what does that mean? Why other gezeres Chazal said, for example, Muktzah, right? Muktzah Chazal set up in the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash primarily. And then that spread, meaning, why didn't this spread? This is a discussion. The Paiskim, the basic idea is that because bread was a main staple of life, it's Chayin Nefesh. People need to have bread, and in certain outlying areas, as the Jews were going into Golus, it just simply wasn't available, wasn't possible. The standard person didn't necessarily have a private oven in their home to bake bread. There was often a communal oven in the town that many families or a whole community used, and there wasn't under Jewish jurisdiction, so to speak. And the Goyim had the monopoly of the oven, or other settings. Just giving one example of what it might have been like, the Paiskim suggest. And since it wasn't possible for them to apply this gezer, and people needed bread, not just for Shabbos, but this was before the gluten-free movement kicked in, and everyone needed bread as a regular staple of their diet, and therefore it never took hold. And this would fall into a category similarly to an idea that it's a gezer that the tzibur couldn't withstand. And we have the principle many times in the Gemara that if it's a Chazal will never institute a gezerah that cannot possibly be upheld by all the individuals. So it's a machlokes rishonim, how weak, so to speak, was this original gezerah. According to the Shulchan Aruch, who's paskening, I think like the Rashba, I think it is, that this gezerah stood and held in certain communities, but in certain communities it wasn't able to stand. So that's why this kula was already originally built in, that there could be a kula in places where Pas Yisroel is not available. It's not that all of a sudden, so to speak, 500 years later, you woke up one morning and said, "Oh, we're hungry. Let's go and buy Pas Palter." It wasn't like that. From the onset already, this kula existed because it just wasn't shaykh for everybody to keep it. However, the other Rishonim, which is the Ramah, according to Mordechai and others, they were saying that once certain communities couldn't adapt it, it wasn't that, and now it became like it's a b'diavad. That became the new norm, and the whole gezerah therefore kind of dissipated and fell away, according to the Ramah's learning, and therefore they allowed completely pas palter. However, pas balabayis, the bread baked by an individual guy, there was never such a need for that, because you can always at least get from some type of commercial bakery. It doesn't have to be some whole National Pepperidge Farm chain, but every town had somebody who's going to be the official town baker. And again, the reason why, I don't think I spoke this out before, why should there be a distinction between a palter, a baker, and an individual, is for a simple reason I think we can relate to easily, is because if the whole gezer is because of chasnas, of intermarriage, so if you're in a commercial setting, there's much less of a personal relationship between the customer and the proprietor of the store, the person who's selling it, the baker. The baker might just be in the back all day. You might have some salesman in the front, or it might just be a self-serve. Whatever the arrangement is much less face time. as opposed to if you just go into your neighbor's house and we're afraid there's much more of an intimate setting and we could get much more social with them. Therefore, that gezerah always stood. So again, at this point,
and even the person use that lashon.
Not on this page, but they borrow that term. I can show it to you. Believe it later. But that's the basic idea. So again, we have at this point we have a machlokes now, Shulchan Aruch and Ramah for a kula in Pas Yisroel. We said again, you start off that Pas Yisroel, everything must be Pas Yisroel, otherwise it's all simply going to be usher. And we said because of intermarriage. Comes along the Shulchan Aruch now, introduces us to the halacha that if Pas Yisroel is not available, you can get Pas Palter. The Ramah takes it even further and says even if Pas Yisroel is available, Pas Palter is going to be mutter. Now, although the Ramah does say this, and this is the custom of many communities, the Aruch HaShulchan writes that in his community he was always makbid to always make sure all the bakeries were Pas Yisrael that the Jewish people were buying from. So even though we had the Ramah to rely on, the Aruch HaShulchan writes that wasn't the minhag where he was the Rav. On the other hand, the Kaf HaChaim, the Sfardi Poskim, he says that the Ashkenazim always rely on Pas Palter. So just to point out, it's interesting. It comes out interesting that the Aruch HaShulchan, who's Ashkenaz, who usually would have the kula of the Ramah, says his town he was always makbid like the Das Shulchan Aruch and many Rishonim. There's even more chomer opinions that we're not going to get into right now. The Shulchan doesn't even quote that would never allow even Pas Palter, and the Aruch HaShulchan, was insisted in his town that they always had Pas Yisrael. On the other hand, the Kaf HaChaim writes that the minhag was by Ashkenaz always to be makel. So we see throughout different communities throughout the millennium, different minhagim existed. I don't have I can't tell you a list of every city in Europe what the minhag was, but it was definitely a topic of discussion when they were establishing the bakeries and the food establishments in town. How much of a kula should they put into place?
So the Kaf HaChaim is saying that the Ashkenazim were makel, but the Sfardim themselves.
So I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know. It could be dependent on the community because it's challenging depending on what community you're living in. It's not always possible. You can imagine, especially if there's anti-Semitism very strong and they're not going to let the Jews into all types. I don't know. I'm not sure how much the Sfardi Poskim were makel for the Sfardim. I don't know. Okay, the Shach in source number 8 speaks out similar to what we spoke at as well. The idea that the reason why we're makel for Pas Palter is because al Pas Yichya Adam, because Pas is a main staple in life, and he quotes Lashon Yerushalmi like that as well. But that again, this is only going to be exclusively for Pas Palter, and this is not going to allow us to buy Pas Balabayis bread baked by an individual guy. There are certain cases in extenuating circumstances, but the Shulchan Aruch discusses later on, and put on the paper where if you're living mamish in the boondocks, literally in the middle of nowhere, and you can't even get Pas Palter, there would be permissibility to buy Pas Balabayis for whatever you need, on a limited amount. But that's really in extenuating circumstances, and I'm not really sure how much that would be applicable to us in the modern setting, because it would be very hard for us to make sure that everything's actually kosher. Again, this topic can't get off the ground if there's any chashash of anything non-kosher ingredients. So nowadays, where there's ingredients are much more complex than they were in days past, that would be hard to make sure that the pas balabayis would be kosher. Now, so let's just take a break for a second. When we go to our regular supermarket, Schnucks, Aldi, wherever we're going, Trader Joe's, wherever we're going shopping, and we see any of the national hashkachas, many of the products, so most of those products, unless you know otherwise, we assume are going to be Pas Palter, are going to be cookies, cakes, crackers, bread, etc. And so we have the Ramah to rely on, that's going to be mutter. And that's
cereal also.
Many of the cereals, we'll get to cereals a little later, many of the cereals as well would fall into that category. But again, it has to be from the 5 grains. If you're buying any cereal which is gluten-free, or corn, and things like that, so that wouldn't be a problem.
Oats are gluten-free, that would
I'm saying any cereal, let's clarify, that's gluten-free, that doesn't have any of the 5 grains, like it's a corn-based cereal, like Corn Flakes, or Corn Chex, or whatever other cereal, I don't know, we'll go through a whole list. All right, that's never a shiloh, because that's going to be, there's no wheat in there, or any of the 5 grains. Okay, so all those products are going to be Pas Palter. So the standard kosher consumer in America, at least, is going to rely on the opinion of the Ramah and buy it. And we'll see soon as we get to Seres Mechuva and other times of the year where maybe we should be more machmer, but that's just clarifying that the standard supermarket product is going to be Pas Palter. Okay, now let's see in source number 9, the Shulchan Aruch here is going to tell us various ways how we can call the bread Pas Yisrael. How much does the Jew have to be involved in the actual making of the bread in order to call it Pas Yisrael? So Shulchan Aruch is going to give us 3 main options. He says as follows in Sif Test. Number 1, Hidlik Ovik Echav Matan, or if the guy lights up the oven, so he turns on the oven, V'afa Ba Yisrael, but the baking is done by the Jew, meaning the bread is put into the oven by the Jew. So if you have he's working in the oven. It doesn't necessarily a very hard job. You can have the guy kneading all the dough. It can even be owned by a guy, so therefore you don't have to even take off challah. And it could be completely owned by a guy, and just all you have the Jewish mashgiach walks in the morning, puts all the racks in the oven, and walks out. That's option one, how to make pas Yisroel, because the Jew is involved. Number two, the Jew lights the fire, turns on the ovens, and the guy does all the labor. So here we can have just paint a scenario for a minute. You have the guy kneading the dough, braiding it, doing all the labor involved. The Jew just waltzes on into the bakery, flips on the switch, and walks out. That's option two, how to make pas Yisroel. Option three, the guy lit the oven. And the guy even baked the bread, so he did everything. And then Uba Yisrael, the Jew walks in, v'nir ha'esh ma'at, and he stokes the coals a little bit. Nowadays it turns up the fire a little. We'll have to clarify exactly in our ovens. This might not be the same as it was in the past, but he does something that stokes the coals, increases the flame. Harei zeh mutter. Then the Shulchan Aruch concludes, how minimal of an action does he have to do? Even if he throws only one minuscule piece of wood chip into the fire, he's now kashered the whole oven. This whole idea over here is to make a distinction that this is not pas hakom, there's a Jew involved in this process. So even, so to speak, a minuscule act of the Jew doing already makes it kosher, makes it pas Yisroel. So if you take this halacha, it shouldn't be that difficult to make pas Yisroel. All you got to do is the Shulchan Aruch's ending off, throw one wood chip into the fire, and this is what led Rav Moshe Chaim Shlita many years ago to suggest that even if you have an incandescent light bulb in an oven which produces some level of heat, right, and he put forth that should permit now make pas Yisroel. Again, everything was kosher beforehand. All the ingredients were kosher. He wanted to now make a hiddur and make that they can now market these products not only being a super kosher, but kosher and pas Yisroel. And he suggested you can put in a light bulb or other things which they call in the industry like a glow bar or these glow plugs, these things that stay on in the oven at all times on some level of heat. That would always allow the oven to remain with some level of heat, and that would make it pas Yisroel. That's what he suggested.
If a Jew turned that light on.
Right, if the Jew turned the light on. The Jew turned the light bulb on and comes back 6 months later to change the light bulb. Whatever.
It doesn't even have to be
but whenever the light bulb goes out, he has to get at least light bulb on. That's what Rabbi Heinemann Shlita suggested. This was a big debate amongst all the kashrus organizations if they would accept this permissibility or not. Again, we're not talking about if the food is kosher. Everyone agreed the food is kosher. It was a question of how to perform this hiddur. You want to make it as pas Yisroel. Would this help or not? And this, of course, is a debate. I'll just summarize without getting into all the details. For the most part, most kashrus agencies do not accept a regular incandescent light bulb to produce pas Yisroel for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is that because a light bulb, although it produces heat, it's not sold as a heat producing element. So therefore, some suggested if you take like a light bulb, like a French fry light bulb, those type of things which are meant to keep food hot, you see like in the fast food places, right? These light bulbs, I don't know exactly how hot they get, but they get really hot, where therefore it's meant to give off, to heat something that they would be more comfortable with. Or a glow bar, which is the idea that there's always some level of heat, about 175 or something, on in the oven. The Jew turned this glow bar on. Now the Goyim turned the rest of the oven on, so they're going to set it to 350, 450, whatever they're setting the oven on. But there's always this level of 175, which is the minimum temperature that they came to a conclusion would be sufficient really to bake bread after a number of hours. That's always on in the oven. Now, again, the Starkey goes with this for what I understand for the most part. I'm not up to date in every one of their latest policies. That's what I understand. Many kashrus agencies accepted part of this kula, and therefore the glow bar or these glow plugs or a light bulb which was made to give off heat, like a French fry light bulb, I'm sure it's a fancy word for it, but that type of term, they accepted to make pas Yisroel. However, the OU here is machmer. Rabelski did not like any of these eitzes, and Rabelski said this would not qualify for pas Yisroel. But keep in mind, Rabelski's being machmer here. We're going to have a kula from Rabelski soon, so he'll balance out. At this point, though, Rabelski was machmir and said that since the Jew's action over here is not really adding or putting into an active fire, he's just kind of leaving a fire on, he wasn't happy with it. He said the halacha would be if the fire was already going and the Jew added to the fire, that would make it pas Yisroel. But just to have this low-level heat on all the time, and the real heat that's cooking the bread would be from the guys turning on and off the oven, Rabelski was not happy with that, and therefore the OU would not mark pas Yisroel items which have this fancy light bulb or this glow bar marked in. But most other kashrus agencies, at least that I'm aware of in America, do rely on some of these coolers.
I wanted to ask, would this work even for a pas bias?
Would this work for pas? Yeah, right. Because now it's not. He's not a bal bias anymore.
Right. So
meaning you're making
I can make a deal with my.
You can make a deal again as long as you can ascertain that everything is completely kosher. All the ingredients are kosher.
The second question is, if the bread was already in the oven and then you threw the stick in the fire, would that also?
So we'll get to that in a minute. How much the bread already had to be baked before you come along. So let's start. Easy case is that it was just still raw.
Right.
We'll get to the next thing in a minute.
You could make an easy distinction that when you stoke the coals, that actually produces a baking quality.
You're doing
But
something.
a bulb doesn't bake the bread.
Okay, I'm not arguing through that. That's one of the tainas. There's multiple tainas against these coolers, so to speak. But it's a kula in a chumrah of making pas Yisroel. So we want to market that. I want to have it as a chumrah with pas Yisroel. And these commercial settings, many of these factories are way out, who knows where. They're not. You can't just have somebody coming in every day necessarily. It's not within a normal range of possibility. They can have the mashgiach available all the time to turn on the ovens and put the bread in. So they were trying to create these situations where you could have pas Yisroel. Nonetheless, okay. Now, before we get similar to what I'm going to go now to what Rabbi Liss just mentioned. Really, let's say the bread was already baked, and now you want to come along and make it pasta. So it was pas palter, let's say. So let's stay away from pas pal bias for now. It was pas palter.
It's already baked, you said?
Yeah, let's get to that right now. That's what we're getting to. So that's the next page on source 10 in the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Yud Beis. It says, let's say the guy baked the bread without a Jew's involvement. So the Shulchan Aruch says on the second line there, Kol's men shahapas tzarach letanur umashbiach ba'afiyosay adayin, as long as the bread still needs to be in the oven and it's still getting better. So even if it's 85% baked for argument's sake, 90% baked, but it's still using the oven for finishing up to make it really geschmack bread, and then the Jew does something at that point, raises the flame, does one of the actions, that would still qualify to make it pas Yisroel. And then he concludes the Shulchan Aruch and says, "V'yesh mi she'omer she'afilu hoitzi hapas." Even if the bread is out, yesh takana lahachziu l'tanu. You can now put it back into the oven. Aidei Yisroel, if a Jew puts it back in, imhu mashbiach. If you're making the bread better. So again, the Shulchan Aruch is bringing two opinions here. We want to know what happens. You missed the initial putting into the oven, and the guy turned on the oven. You're 10 minutes too late, so to speak. You came in you got stuck in traffic, and the mashgiach missed it, and they put the food in the oven already. So everything's kosher. Again, we're not concerned. We want to make it pas Yisroel. So the first opinion of Shulchan Aruch is, as long as the bread is still in the oven, and it still has what to gain from being in the oven, it's not just sitting there for no reason, and the Jew now raises the flame, does something active to make the oven now under, he did something in it, that's going to make it pas Yisroel. The second opinion is even more makel. Even if the bread already came out of the oven and it's complete, but if I can put it back into the oven and make it better, then that would kosher the bread and make it pas Yisroel. Now, what this is not talking about seemingly is par-baked items. You can go to Schnucks or other national supermarkets and you can buy sometimes a bread which is meant to complete at home. And then if you do that at home, as long as it's kosher, again, all the ingredients are kosher, and then you'll make it pas Yisroel. So you buy these, not talking about if you buy dough. Of course, you buy frozen like Rhodes dough or those things. Of course, you make that pas Yisroel. It's no question. So even something already has a tzura of bread, but it's meant to be completed at home to give you that, fresh bread baking sensation and smell in your house. If you finish that at home, it takes 10, 15 minutes, whatever it does, to cook it, bake it still. That's for sure going to be called pas Yisroel. What this is talking about now is the bread is completely baked, but you're going to be mashbiach it. So here Rabbi Belsky came along with a kula, and Rav Moshe Sternbach Shlita agrees to him as well, that if you buy a regular loaf of rye bread, white bread, completely done, the Schnucks bread, the pepper trum, whatever company you're buying, it's pas palter, and you bring it home and toast it, that's going to make it pas Yisroel. Because what did you just do? You mashbiach the bread. You had a regular piece of bread, and now it's not just a regular piece of bread, it's a chashuv piece of toast. And so according to these paiskim, they said you could consider that piece of bread, you can market that now as pas Yisroel.
Or if you had it in the fridge and you took it out and put it in the microwave for 10 seconds.
Well, I'm not sure if that would be the same, because really you didn't make the bread. You're heating it, but it's not. All you're doing is warming it. The toast is actually changing the tzura of the bread. So if you just happen to use the microwave, so to speak, to hasten up your warming process, that doesn't do anything, right? Because if you would have left it out for 10 minutes, a half hour, whatever it is, it would also would have got room temperature. Just making it hotter. But hotter. I'm not sure if hotter is enough. They're saying toast because it's actually. All right, but the point is that toasting is definitely putting a change, and more of a positive change into the bread, and therefore these poskim were makel about that. Not everybody accepts this kula, but I gave you a chumrah before for Abelski, so here's a kula that if you toast the bread, that would make it pas Yisroel as well.
What do you make French toast from it?
So it was pas palter, and now you fried it up.
Same thing. You change the surah. You increase.
Seemingly, that's according to those people. I would agree with you. I didn't see him say that case, but I would agree with you in theory. That should be because you really changed the whole thing. You changed it.
You put it in the oven to make hot bread. Like.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Hot by itself, I don't know if that's sufficient. I think toast is actually changing the tzura of the bread. But just warming it up, I don't think that would be mashbiach. It's got to be something that you can see that it makes it look different. That's what I think. Okay.
Frozen pizza.
Well, frozen pizza, I was going to say, or frozen hot pretzels. If you make that at home, that's not going to make it pas Yisroel. Now, I haven't seen many of the kosher pizza companies that sell the Amnons and J2, all these companies, they're pas Yisroel to begin with. That's what it says in the package. That's 25 Hebrew words there. They're all say, it's everything, right? But let's say you buy a box of hot pretzels, OU certified hot pretzels. So those pretzels are already edible already, and they're just frozen. All you're really doing is heating it up, making it warm now. That would not create it. It would not be. We wouldn't call it mashbiach. All you're doing is making it hot.
When you're melting the cheese on your pizza now, it's better than it was before.
Are you melting more cheese on it? I'm not
the
sure.
cheese is on there. It's not really melted. If it's frozen, you can't eat it.
It's frozen. It's not really edible right now.
Edible.
Yeah, but it's edible without the microwave. You just have to wait. You're in a rush. You want to have.
You're still creating a change in the bread.
I'm not sure.
We want to eat it different than when it was frozen. You're creating a change within the bread.
But yeah, I'm not sure that'd be enough to be hashbachas. I'm not sure. I don't know.
But the cheese is
I'm willing to say that would not be enough, but
unmelted cheese.
I'm welcome to. We can look into it. Local Orthodox rabbi. We got to finish up. Let's go. Okay, now. How long does the Eish Shel Yisrael last? Meaning, so we had the Mashgiach come in, he turned on the oven, and then he said, okay, I'll see you next year. So that means then the whole year that the oven is on continuously, would that be considered Pas Yisrael? So from the simple reading of the Ramah, it would seem like that in source 11, the Ramah says, V'yesh oimrim, V'im hichshir hatanur pamachas, V'loy omar hatanur me'es la'es, V'loy hesek, it remained on continuously, right? In those days, you talk about the oven had to be constantly fed with wood chips, whatever you were burning, right? So as long as it was continuously fed, nowadays as long as the gas line stays open, right? Afilu afa by kach kama yamim hakol mutter mikaya hechsher rishon and v'yesh lis mechazeh. So Ramaz Mekel and says, as long as the original fire is still going, you're good to go. Now, not all the
once it's off, a Jew has to light it again.
If you want to be Pas Yisroel, yes. Once it's off. Now, what happens is, let me just first discuss this for a second. So, this comes up obviously in a commercial setting a lot. The bakers, they might be the factory might be on 24/7. So it seemed like it's very simple. You check in January 1st in the year 1900, turn on the factory, and you're good to go until the factory closes down, whenever that happens. Now, although in theory that's what the Ramah is saying, and those are the words, not all the places can say that this should be done forever. Some people say it's good for a week, 24 hours, it just meaning or more, or a couple of days. But the bottom line is that the kashrus agencies rely on this Ramah that they'll consider Pas Yisroel from every time from inspection to inspection. So wherever the next time Mashiach goes, they'll recommend he turns on and off the oven or on and off the pilot, whatever it is, to make it again. But really, we're going to rely on this Ramah, and therefore you might have one fire that was turned on and might be going for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it is. In order to make sure it's still Pas Yisroel.
As long as they're not 24-hour hefsek.
Right, now as long as they're off. Now, meaning hefsek of the oven completely cools down. Nowadays, 24 hours is not really a good measuring stick because if the oven's off for an hour or two already, it's probably going to be pretty cool. You can touch it already. So what exactly is the amount of heat the oven has to stay on? He says ace because seemingly he's talking about a situation there where it retained some more heat. I don't know exactly the mitzias. But it comes up, they discuss, the contemporary question comes up, you have a convection oven. Every time you open a convection oven, it goes off, the flame goes off. And you close it goes back on. That's a safety mechanism it has. So if you have a Jew, the Mashgiach comes in the morning, lights up the ovens. So it's Pas Yisroel, no problem. But then they open the oven to take out the bread. And now, when they close the door, the flame goes on again. It starts, there's no pilot light in there. It's electric ignition. So is that considered to be Pas Yisroel or Pas Palta now, the second run? So
how long the oven door is open.
Right, exactly what we're going to say. Because even though it's a new flame now, but since if the oven retained heat, they say approximately at least 175 approximately. The point is that it's too hot to touch. that in that oven that will be considered still Pas Yisroel, even though the original flame is no longer here. So you had again the mashgiach turn on the ovens. He walks out when they take their first loaf, the first batch of bread out. The oven's shut off, but as soon as they put the next batch in, the oven kicks back on. As long as the oven remains hot in between that, the switching over.
He say the ace ace.
Okay, I'm not sure of the mitzvahs. It sounds like there was something that somehow kept heat there. I don't know how that worked exactly. Okay, let's discuss now halacha, which is negay every Shabbos, every week. We're going to have to move quickly here. The Shulchan Aruch says in source number 12. I'm going to cut down to where halfway down the paragraph. It says Haga noigin lolosh kadei shir challah. The minhag is we make challah, the amount that a person is obligated to separate. We bake challah, the bread challah, in order that there's the amount that there's enough to separate challah from it. But bias lasses them l'chamin to make bread for Shabbos. Liftsoy aleim b'Shabbos v'yantiv to separate. To bake bread, to break on it. Should be for Shabbos and Yantiv. Who mikvayt Shabbos v'Yantiv and l'shana. So this is the minhag that it's usually carried out by women, but the minhag is we make challah for Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah says over there in source number 13, it says v'ayim b'achroinim da'afilu, where it's underlined da'afilu lahanoigim lecho pas paltul she'eni Yehudi b'chol. Even by many people who go with the sheet of the Rambah and eat pas paltul during the week, v'kamakam b'Shabbos v'Yantiv nochal lizar shal yachal kiyim b'pas yisrael b'nei kvayla Shabbos v'Yantiv. On Shabbos and Yantiv, can you thanks. On Shabbos and Yantiv, we should be careful only to eat Pas Yisroel because that's more covered Shabbos. So he's going on this halacha where it talks about baking bread. The Mishnah Berurah is calling the Magen Avraham and other Paiskim were saying that we should be careful to only have Pas Yisroel. It's more covered Shabbos. So this is the source that many people are machmir on Shabbos to make sure only have Pas Yisroel. Now, there is a contemporary machlekes HaPoskim. You have to move a little quickly here to cover it. But is this going only on the challahs of Shabbos or on all the baked goods on Shabbos? We said before that the halachas of Pas isn't only to bread; it's really on any cookies, cakes, pies, crackers, etc. So there are those that want to learn this halacha. There are those who want to learn this halacha applies to anything we eat on Shabbos. So, not only the challah of Shabbos, but any cakes, cookies, for example. Many people have, at least growing up, people used to have Stella Dora cookies, which are a parav cookie on Shabbos. Right? That was part of the Shabbos party. If you go into the simple reading of the Mishnah Berurah over here, it would seem that should not be, it's allowed. It's not usher, but it's not recommended because it's a higher level of covered Shabbos being makbid on Pas Yisroel only on Shabbos. Or Oreo cookies, or any other, regular Ritz crackers, whatever they are, which would not be Pas Yisroel. However, some Paiskim heard this from a Newstat Shlita that they take this chumrah only for the actual challah of Shabbos. They wouldn't apply it to the other baked goods on Shabbos. That's a contemporary machlekes.
Even though it has hashgacha.
Even though it's hashgacha, it's pas palter. But we want to be extra careful for more covered Shabbos than Pas Yisroel. So we would be careful with that on Shabbos. It's a minhag. It's not. It's a chumrah to have it makbid on Shabbos. Now we're going to move on to the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi in source 14, which is going to be the source for what many of us are familiar with keeping Pas Yisroel during a Seres Tshuva. So the Yerushalmi is not talking about bread at all. The Yerushalmi says, Rab Chia, the Rebbe was mafkid the Rav. He commanded Rav, his student, in at yachol mechol b'kol shot chulin b'tara achol. If you're able to eat the whole year round chulin, regular mundane food b'tahara, like you're able to eat true, meaning eat it in a higher level of kedusha, you should do that. But if you're not able to do that, tehei achel shiva yamim min shata. At least 7 days a year, you should be careful to eat chulin b'tahara. And you look at the carbon 8 over there; he's referring to Aseres Tshuva, the days in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that you should make sure to eat that week all your chulin b'tahara. So we see from this Yerushalmi a precedent. The idea that during Aseres Tshuva we should be more careful with the chul that we should eat a b'tahara. Now comes along the Rishonim. By the times where the Rishonim they didn't have, no one ate chulin b'tahara. We can't keep this halacha nowadays. So the Torah and other Rishonim they adapted this halacha to the chumrah that we should not eat pas palter during Aseres Tshuva, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins it as well in source 14. Af mish ein nizar mi pashal akom Aseres Tshuva tzarich lizayer. Even if someone is not careful from pas akom the whole year, meaning pas palter of a baker during Aseres Tshuva, we should be careful to do it because this is a modern application of the halacha of Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi again was not talking about bread; he was talking about chulin b'tahara. So to apply this to a more modern setting, the Shulchan Aruch Rishonim are saying we put this into bread. And Mishnah Berurah in source 16 goes through some of the details of it to keep in mind. Although this is an ancient minhag, meaning it's been around for quite some time and it's well accepted in Klal Yisrael, it's not more chamor then pas palter, so to speak, the rest of the year for Sfardim. And therefore, we didn't speak this out before, but even if you're a Sfardi, if there's no pas Yisroel available within a certain radius of your location, then you're allowed to eat the pas palter. So too, if you're in a situation during a Seder Simei Tshuva where Pas Yisrael is not available, it's not us to eat the Pas Palter. You should try, we should do our utmost to get the Pas Yisrael, but if it's not available, Pas Palter would be permitted as well. Just to go back to what someone asked me before about the breakfast cereal, so in source number 17, Rav Forshamer Shlili from Lakewood said over that regarding Cheerios, that he says he looked into it and he heard that Cheerios are not really completely baked. They're more cooked than baked. They're only baked a drop at the end to give it a certain crisp or something, but really it's a cooked product, and therefore, although you make a mezainas them, but it would not be in the category of bread, according to Rav Forshamer, and therefore he says it would not be a problem during a Seder Simei Tshuva to have your Cheerios for breakfast. It would not be a problem of...
Considered pas.
It's not considered pas, right. Now just to end off with the Reb Chaim Freelanders at Tzal Mashkiach and Panovich, he asked a very basic fundamental question over here. He says, we're up to Seder Simei Tshuva, we're trying to get close to Hashem, and we're trying to be better Jews. So we're going to say, you know what, for 1 week I'll change my diet. What does that mean? We're trying to fool HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chas v'Shalom. If we know we're going right back to it after Yom Kippur, and we know that we're just doing it for a few days just to look, so to speak, extra frum. So what are we trying to do? What kind of show? Who are you fooling by just, for 1 week being machmer on this? And this is really a strong idea. He says, the idea he wants to say is that really, we're not fooling anybody, but we're teaching ourselves how we could behave, right? We're used to the whole year we have certain activities. We eat pas palter. We have certain behaviors towards certain people. Comes Elul, comes the Seder Simei Tshuva, we say, yeah, we'll try to do tshuva, but we know we're not, we can't really do anything. We're not really going to change. We're the same creatures of habit. We're not going to do anything different. And, we made it till now doing this, we'll continue doing this. So we're going to train ourselves for this week and put ourselves, so to speak, on a strict diet to show ourselves that what? No, we're not creatures of habit. We are able to change. Maybe you're able to continue with this for another week. Maybe you're able to do this for another day. But we're not addicted, so to speak, to our habits that we can't break it. We're going to show ourselves. The message here is to show ourselves that we can break our habits, we can break our addictions, and we can become closer to Hashem. I think particularly with food we're doing it as opposed to other mitzvahs or halachas we can tack on to. But food particularly is something that we can all relate to. We know the closest way to a man's heart, right, is through his stomach. So if we can train our eating habits during this upcoming Seder Simei Tshuva, it'll be a good sign for us that we are in control of ourselves, we're in control of our actions, and we should all be zeicha to a k'sim v'ch'sim v'teva.